Okay. Can you hear me okay, Jessica?
Yeah, I can hear you great, Hannah.
Okay, perfect. Well, I want to introduce myself formally. My name is Hannah. I go by she, her pronouns. Feel free to call me by my first name. Um, did you find the Zoom link okay?
Yeah. A little technical difficulties for me, but it was fine. I'm glad to be meeting over Zoom. It's quite a bit more convenient for me than getting to your office.
I'm glad to hear that. Let's see. So I did receive your intake form and I did review it a little bit. I was thinking kind of for a plan today in our intake session, we might refer to that a little bit, talk about what's bringing you in, any concerns that you're having. And I might look at a list of questions that I have that I kind of standardly ask all of my clients in our intake session. And that's just to get to know each other a little bit better. Um, let's see. And did you get that confidentiality waiver that I sent over?
Yeah. I signed it, but I forgot to email it back to you, so I'll get that over.
Okay.
And yeah, that sounds great going through the intake form, just kind of getting to know each other. That sounds perfect.
Perfect. Did you have any questions about the confidentiality form or any of the information that I shared with you?
Um, no, I think it was pretty straightforward.
Okay, perfect. And if any questions or concerns come up during our session, feel free to stop me
Mhm.
um, and
Cool. Thank
discuss
you.
that as you need. Sure thing. Okay. All right. So I see on your intake form here, you listed that you are a medical scribe in the ER. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I've been working there for a couple years now, just as I'm going to school. It's night shifts mainly and evening shifts, which is pretty nice because it allows me to like go to class during the day and then still work.
So you are in school and still working. How is
Yeah.
that like balancing the two?
Um, it's going pretty good. Yeah, I really enjoy both what I'm doing and being a scribe. A lot of what I do is just like dictation type stuff, which is pretty easy, and I'm a fast typer, so I don't even follow the doctors in most of the time. I'm just like writing the reports up, so I'll have like homework pulled up sometimes, and then yeah, so it's almost like scheduled study time.
And what do you like most about your work?
It's really interesting. So I'm doing a social work undergrad right now. And it's really cool, especially like the psych patients that come in, getting to see like different extreme cases too, and just like other aspects of how practitioners work. Um, Besides for just like a social work aspect, seeing like multiple elements of care.
It sounds like there's a lot of experiential learning involved and maybe some
Mhm.
that you can bring back to the classroom and share.
Totally. Yeah, it's fun being able to tell the stories in my class too.
Now, is there a least favorite part of your job?
Um, Sometimes the hours are really long. So like the days can just be yeah, really long if I'm doing school for like 6 hours sometimes, and then also having to do like an 8 hour shift after that. It just feels like a lot. And then there's not much else outside of like school work. Um, mhm.
Are you finding any time for hobbies or any extracurriculars?
Um, Not really, honestly. No, not really. Not lately. When I've had like time off for breaks, I like to paint, um,
So,
and like do some artistic things. I also live with my boyfriend. We've been dating for around 3 years. And so like we'll go do something, like we might work out together. Um, yeah.
and what's your relationship with your boyfriend like?
It's pretty good. Yeah. He's really supportive. Um, Yeah, I wouldn't say he's as driven as me. So sometimes I find myself getting pulled into like some patterns that I'd like to quit. Um, like he smokes weed quite a bit, and I'd kind of like to stop smoking weed. But having being around him, it's like such an easy thing to do. Um, and I get pretty anxious too sometimes. I've had anxiety since I was a kid. So, like, smoking weed helps, but I think I'm starting to realize it might not be that great for me. But otherwise, he's really easy to talk to and he's really supportive of everything in my life. So, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Uh, Let's see. So you mentioned that you have had anxiety for most of your life. Could you tell me a little bit more about your anxiety and when it shows up, maybe what it looks like?
Yeah, so it's mainly like social anxiety. Like, I get really anxious in large crowds. It's honestly gotten kind of worse as an adult, particularly with COVID over the past couple of years. Because I was already anxious. Um, like it's hard for me to call people on the phone and talk to them. I don't really like going to like parties and things like that. It's gotten a little bit worse during COVID, where like going into the grocery store makes me anxious. So I'll like order my groceries. Um, yeah, things like that.
That makes a lot of sense why you would feel anxious in those settings, especially as COVID is happening. Let's see. I did see on your intake form that you also had some anxiety that you listed around driving. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I was in a pretty bad car accident about 2 years ago, which is really why I'm seeking therapy. I didn't think it was that big of an issue, but I was driving alone in the rain late at night, and my car started to hydroplane, um, going around like 60 miles an hour. I hit another oncoming car, and they actually had to use like the jaws of life to get me out. Um, like while it was raining, I was in the hospital for like a week. Had to have like hip surgery, ankle surgery. Um, but I'm recovered from that. But I noticed like every time I get in the car, I have like images of the car accident come into my mind. I like feel pretty anxious driving, and if the weather's even like slightly bad, I typically avoid it. But I was going to an interview actually for a social work placement for my BSW a couple weeks ago, and um, it was raining, and I really wanted to make it to the interview. So it was one of the first times that I had like been driving in the rain,
Mhm.
and I actually started to have anxiety attacks and had to like pull over and have my sister come get me. Um, and so after that, I was like, this is something I'd like to work on.
Well,
Yeah,
Jessica, that sounds like a really scary experience. I'm really sorry that you went through that.
thank you.
Um, and in reference to what you mentioned about your panic attack that happened a few weeks ago, what were some kind of indicators that were happening in your body that kind of let you know that that's happening?
Hmm. Let me think about that for a second. Um, Kind of felt like my chest was getting tight,
Hmm.
and almost like my vision was narrowing. Like it was hard to pay attention to a lot of things.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like my mind just started racing. Like I couldn't really like focus. Started like breathing really heavily, um, and then I just started kind of freaking out. I was like, I need to pull over. I can't drive anymore. And then I was just too scared to drive the rest of the way or drive home. So luckily, my sister lives around the area too. So I just had her come get me.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that with me. And do you feel like those are some similar experiences that you have when you're having panic attacks in public spaces or, like you mentioned, in the grocery store?
They're a little bit different because I don't really get panic attacks in the grocery store.
Mhm.
Um, and like images don't really come up for me. I'm more just like I get nervous talking to people. I get nervous like making eye contact with people. I'm wondering like if they're judging me type of things as I walk through the like crowded spaces. Yeah. I feel like I'm really aware of like what I'm doing, like what my actions are, and like almost like hyper aware of them when I'm walking through spaces of like, oh, what does this person think about me? Do they think I'm walking weird? Do they, yeah.
And is there any current medication that you are taking for your anxiety?
Yeah, I've been taking Zoloft for about 6 months now. Um, and that's helped quite a bit. I also am a little depressed and have been dealing with that since I was younger too. They kind of both came on at the same time. Um, and Zoloft, I feel like helps with both of them quite a bit. Although I'm noticing that I'm having to like up my dose now. Um, yeah.
And you mentioned that you had kind of an early onset with anxiety and depression. Um, what was that like in your childhood? Do you kind of remember how that onset happened?
Yeah, so when I was in elementary school, actually, I started my period pretty early, when I was 10 in fifth grade. And um, as a result, I started getting bullied by a lot of my friends. Um, my friend group actually like totally turned against me when I was younger and got really sad about that. They even like stole my journal and like posted things on Facebook and like hacked my social media accounts. Um, yeah, and so I lost like most of my friends when I was like 10, 11. Didn't really trust people, so kind of got into like a different group of friends with like bad kids. But yes, that's when also when I started smoking weed around like 13. Yeah, drinking at 13 too, if I'm being honest.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it sounds like a really disappointing and socially isolating experience that you went through. And
Mm,
I'm
that was.
why you would maybe be exploring some of those substances as to
Mm.
feel better about the situation.
Yeah, they felt like, I'm realizing now, I feel like they felt like something to numb how I was feeling.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like, unfortunately, that carried into being an adult. But now that I'm 26, I feel like it's not really something I'm starting to notice that it's more like I use it to numb how I'm feeling.
Mhm.
Um, and that might not be the most beneficial. Your intake form helped with that a bit actually, because it asked if I like saw them as a problem. And at first I was like, no, not at all. And then I was thinking about it a little more. It's like maybe, yeah,
Hmm,
maybe not something I really want to be doing as much as I do.
sure. And would you say that the use of marijuana and I know you mentioned alcohol in the intake form here too. Would you say that that's a pretty big coping mechanism, especially when you are feeling those feelings of depression and anxiety? On that note, do you feel like you maybe use any other activities? You mentioned art. Is that something that you can use when you are kind of feeling triggered?
Yeah, art definitely helps me like escape as well. Um, like I notice I'm not thinking about anything else when I'm painting, and that's really nice. Time kind of goes by fast too when I'm painting.
Hmm.
Um, I do feel like it's harder to want to paint when I'm like feeling more depressed
Sure.
um, or like more anxious. It's hard for me to like have energy to want to do it. It's almost like it's more when I'm like feeling good that I decide to paint, like feeling good and have some free time. Um, and when I'm not feeling good, it's more like I might make myself a margarita and watch a movie on the couch type of
Well,
thing.
that makes a lot of sense, especially if, painting is something that you're really passionate about and makes you feel happy when you're feeling those depressed feelings and feeling like you have low energy, you might be, more inclined to using other coping mechanisms, like you said, making margaritas.
Mhm.
Um, I know you mentioned that you were interested in cutting down on your smoking. Have you um, thought about that anymore or um, attempted to reduce that in the past?
I used to take tolerance breaks in the past,
Hmm.
but that's only because I was smoking so much that I realized um, I was no longer getting as high as I wanted to. And so then I would take smoking breaks so that I could get more high in the future. But in terms of tolerance breaks and like any thoughts of quitting, I've never really tried before.
Okay,
Mhm.
for sharing that with me. And on that note, too, I see that you noted you drink weekly. Is that something that you would also be interested in reducing?
Um, Mainly the weed right now,
Hmm.
because the drinking isn't really, I wouldn't consider it problematic because I'm not like getting drunk. I'm more like enjoying a drink a couple days a week, which doesn't feel as much of a problem to me as smoking does. Whereas like when I'm anxious and like if my boyfriend's at work and I don't have any friends to hang out with and it's like late at night and I feel like lonely, it's like weed that I'm going to, I'm noticing.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
And let's see. And you mentioned maybe feeling some lack of energy, especially when those depressive symptoms are pretty prevalent. How is your sleep? Do you feel like you are getting adequate sleep every night?
Um, Most nights, yeah, most nights.
Do
Yeah,
you?
I sleep pretty well when I am asleep,
Mhm.
and my boyfriend's pretty good when he's not working late at like keeping a bedtime routine. We're both pretty almost like OCD with our routines, so yeah, like 10 p.m. bedtime, we're both like ready for it and like are kind of strict at maintaining it. So that's
Do you
good.
feel like that kind of carryovers into other areas of your life being very routine?
Yeah. Yeah. Like everything's always immaculately clean. Um, I plan out all of my schedules, like color coded in a planner for a couple hours a week. Um, I have to always be on time for things. I really like to be like early for them.
Mhm.
I plan out all of my clothes for the week by day beforehand. Yeah, very, very scheduled.
And does that scheduling help you feel like you have more control over your week as you mentioned it's really packed? Um,
Um, yeah, I think it makes me feel more control over my life in general.
mhm,
Um, I feel like when I don't have a plan ready, I
mhm.
kind of freak out sometimes, and then I'm like not as prepared. Like if I'm going to class, then I end up like flustered there. Um, if I'm not going in prepared, and then I like can't really focus. Yeah.
And when you're feeling unfocused and flustered, what is that experience like? Do you feel like any urge to, I don't know, for example, like go home and maybe like just kind of check out, or what does that look like for you?
I mean, getting out of there is definitely how I feel. Like I just don't really want to be in the space.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like it's similar to how I feel when I go in like the grocery store too. Of like if I'm not coming in fully prepared, then I'm like, oh, people notice I'm not prepared. Like people, yeah, are judging me for this. And then I'm like, I feel flustered. And so like it's almost like the vision narrowing thing.
Hmm.
But like where how I'm able to focus, I'm not really able to like pay attention to what's going on in the classroom or what other people are saying. I'm just kind of focused on my own thoughts,
Mhm.
like my heart racing type thing.
Well, that makes a lot of sense when you're feeling really activated and triggered, that you have some
Mhm.
hard time focused and really be focused on your internal feelings.
Mhm.
Let's see. So you mentioned that your boyfriend is a really big part of your life, and that he is really supportive. Who else in your circle of family or friends would you consider a support for you?
My big sister is probably my largest support. Um, yeah, she's my best friend. She's one of my only friends, honestly. Um, yeah, but we're really close.
And does your sister live in the area? How do you usually keep in contact?
Yeah, she lives a couple miles away. She's also going to school. Um, yeah, she's just kind of always been there for me, almost as like a third parent.
Mm,
Um, yeah, she'll come over maybe once a week. We'll hang out often when my boyfriend's at work. And just like have a good time, just catch up and joke and play games.
that sounds like a really special relationship.
Mhm.
And you mentioned her being a third parent. On that note, let's see, what is your relationship like with your parents right now?
Um, my relationship is good with my parents in terms of like they support me. My parents are still together.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like they're almost a little immature emotionally. And so I find that like they might argue with each other, and I'm kind of facilitating like
Mm,
the bickerments. Especially when my older sister left the house, because I feel like she kind of was like a mediator.
mhm,
Um, and I never really had to deal with it, but she's 4 years older, so she left. And then suddenly, like, I had to deal with the dynamics with my parents. And besides for that, like, they're very supportive. They're supporting me through school. Like my mom sends me message. Both my mom and my dad will like call me just to check up on me, send me nice messages. They only live like a half hour away, and my mom works in Ann Arbor. So she'll like stop by and bring me groceries, or my dad will come by and like fix something in my apartment and we'll like have lunch. So like overall it's pretty good. Um, yeah, I just because I felt like they're a little immature. I haven't been able to like fully open myself up to them.
mhm.
Um, yeah.
Do you feel like your parents, playing that role as a mediator for them and kind of realizing that they might have some emotional maturity, do you feel like that has prevented you from getting closer with them? And you feel like that's an often a theme that kind of happens when you are in the same space as them?
Yeah, I feel like it's emotionally draining when I'm in the same space as them. Um, just like I almost have to more emotionally support them
Hmm.
than they do me, which is why I say my sister is kind of like a third parent because she's just like a rock of a person. Yeah, just like has her shit together, has always had her shit together.
Hmm.
Um, and can almost parent me, like be there in a role. Like even sometimes if I'm like low on money, she'll cover my rent type of deal. Um,
And when you are playing this kind of mediator role for your parents, what do their interactions look like? Does that mean that they're verbally arguing?
mm,
Usually look like.
yeah, they'll yell at each other for sure, but almost like it's not like violent yelling. It's almost like kindergarten yelling. Like imagine you were facilitating an argument between 5-year olds and they're like, no, you did this. And, no, you did like it's pretty it's almost comical, but it's the kind of comical where you're just like, why am I having to do this for my parents?
Yeah, especially as, you are their child and you makes sense that you would kind of feel almost invalidated by that situation because they're supposed to
Mhm.
play a parental role.
Mhm.
Let's see. I'm just looking at my notes here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure that we've got everything. Let's see. So you mentioned that your sister, you felt like she had her life together, and you were maybe making some comments that you didn't quite have your life on the same trajectory. Could you tell me a little bit more about that and how you're feeling?
Mhm. Yeah. I think it mainly comes down to like a few things. Like when I think about my sister and like her having her life together, I think about how she's just always been able to like support herself.
Hmm.
Um, like my parents are putting me through school. She just like got scholarships for school. And then from since when she was 18, she like took on all the bills um, for herself.
Hmm.
Um, she's always had like a lot of friends. Like I say, she's like my only friend in Ann Arbor, whereas like she probably hangs out with like 15 people on a weekly basis that she keeps up with. Um, yeah, she's just always been good in school, always had like a really good relationship with a boyfriend. She's just always had a good job. Um, yeah, she kind of seems like Superwoman sometimes.
Sounds like a great role model to have.
Mm.
Um, you mentioned friends earlier, and you were saying that your boyfriend is and your sister are your main friends. Are making more friends perhaps through coworkers or your cohort at school. Is that something that you're interested in?
Yeah, I'd like to. I just kind of find it hard to make friends,
Mhm.
probably because of how I lost friends when I was growing up. Um, I just worry that like I'm gonna get close to people and like things are gonna go wrong and then I'm gonna be upset or um, I find that like the friends that I really want to make, I'm kind of intimidated by. Um, so I end up making friends with people that like also smoke weed or like don't really have a stable job or like might also have anxiety and depression instead of like there's like a couple girls in some of my social work classes that I'd like to be friends with, but I find it like intimidating to talk to them.
So, well, it sounds like you have, a lot of valid fear from your past experience in opening up and being vulnerable with new friends. That can be a really challenging thing to do. Let's see. I I'm going to take a moment to pause for a second. Thanks, Jessica, for pausing with me there while I looked at my notes. I see on your intake form, I'm just going to kind of loop back around to it if that's
Mm,
okay,
totally.
that you marked that you identify as bisexual.
Mm. Mhm.
Could you tell me a little bit more about how that identity has kind of developed within your life? And do you feel that the people close to
Mm.
you have shown you support? I know that can be,
Mm.
tough to kind of deviate from heteronormativity, especially in our society.
Yeah.
Do you mind telling me a little bit more about it?
Totally. Yeah. So I think I realized I was bisexual when I was younger. A lot of the friends that I had, I actually like kissed three of them, of the girlfriends that I had and the guy friends as well when I was younger. And so I think I've always realized I was bisexual. And my mom actually caught me kissing some of my friends. Which she actually wasn't. I think she thought I was too young for that, which I probably was at like 8. But she still seemed pretty supportive. Like she didn't seem to care whether it was a girl or a guy. My parents don't know I'm bisexual though. My sister does, and she fully embraces that. And I've dated girls, and she's met them, and we've even gone on like double dates. So I feel pretty comfortable talking to her about all of that. I feel like I could probably tell my mom, um, but my dad will often make like gay jokes. Like we'll be at Thanksgiving, and he'll like make fun of a cousin that's gay or something like that. Um, and so I don't really feel safe coming out to him. Yeah.
Mm, in those moments where he is making those jokes, how are you feeling and reacting?
Um, just pretty uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like my chest closes a little bit. I feel like I'm not fully accepted or like couldn't be seen fully by him. Uh,
Mhm.
which is unfortunate because I'm almost closer with my dad than I am my mom. Like he was really there for me when I was little and when I was depressed. Um, because he was a stay-at-home dad, and my mom actually works in the hospital, so she's working like 60 hours a week as a nurse, and my dad stayed home with me. So I got like really close to him when I was depressed.
Mhm.
So it makes me almost more sad that I feel like he would judge me and maybe not love me as much if he knew that I liked girls too. Um, but I think my mom wouldn't care. Like my mom would probably be like my sister.
And you mentioned you and your dad were really close. Has that relationship changed now in your adult life, or would you consider yourself pretty close still?
I'd consider us pretty close still. I think he almost overshares a little too much with me. He also is pretty depressed, which has made me wonder if it like could run in the family or if it just stems from when I was a kid. Um, but yeah, I probably wish that he told me a little less sometimes, and got a therapist rather than his daughter. But yeah.
Do you feel like you're playing that role for him a lot of the time to be his emotional support?
Mm, yeah, yeah. I feel like I'm a lot like my dad emotionally, and my sister probably like my mom, where she's like really outgoing, has a lot of friends, whereas like my dad doesn't really have any friends, and is probably like just close with like my mom and me.
And is establishing a close relationship with your dad and maybe um, telling him about your bisexuality and your identity something that you would like to potentially do in the future?
Um, I'd like to, but I'm just kind of scared to do so right now because I don't want it to change our relationship. And I feel like I would need to feel safe from him in order to share.
Let's see. Well, thank you for sharing that with me, Jessica.
Thank you for listening.
Let's see. I just want to double check that we've gone through most of the things that we just needed to talk about today. It does look like we are kind of nearing the end of our session. Do you have any questions or any other thing that you would like to share with me before we end our session?
Um, no, I think this was great. And yeah, I'm looking forward to working with you in the future.
Well, I am also looking forward to working with you. Thank you for being so open and honest with me today. And I look forward to um, doing more work with you.